So welcome to the show, Heather, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight. So I started practicing yoga in 1996 when I was 19. And I think that I always had an interest in yoga. It was on the periphery for me in terms of something that I wanted to experience. As I'm very out, I had mental health issues. But it wasn't until I actually studied a semester abroad as part of my university education in India that I started practicing yoga. And I don't know if I really understood at that time what yoga was. It wasn't until maybe 2000 when I went to Asia and Southeast Asia to work on my mental health and continue to practice yoga that I really had an appreciation for what it could offer. See, I was a gymnast, and so in the first instance, I just thought it was an adult form of gymnastics. It took some time to understand the real value. And yeah, here I am all these years later, still deeply devoted to the practice. Um, I think first and foremost, it was probably the philosophy. I think for so many people, it's the movement. And it's the idea of doing all of these interesting poses. But for me, I have always been drawn to this concept of oneness, to the dispelling of the illusion of the mind. I know very well, and I had from a young age, that the mind is able to envision all kinds of things that may not hold up to truth. And I wanted a practice that would allow me to cultivate my wisdom and let go of confused and false views. And it was only later that I understood that that could be supported through movement, through breath work, through the further cultivation of the yamas and the niyamas, or the disciplines and observances. But it was really the philosophy. I was 19.
Wow, that is young. And
I could tell you a little bit more because I have a unique journey if you want, but I haven't gotten into it. as to why would a 19-year-old be so deeply interested in the philosophy, right? Do you want me to
Yeah.
delve? Okay. So I actually had, as I mentioned, I always had this inkling that there was something more than the very mundane reality. My undergraduate degree, I have two of them. One was in philosophy. So I was always questioning the nature of truth. I went to Costa Rica when I was 18 years old, and I took a malarial medication, and I had a really bad reaction to it. And it led me to realize that there was not substance to the mind. And that's quite an intense realization for a young person to have. And I really thought that actually I was crazy. I went back to Manhattan, where I'm from. I went to see a psychiatrist, and he was quite a special person. And you know what he said to me? I'm sorry. I know you want a pill to fix what's happening for you, but some people have special experiences, and I believe you're one of them. The only thing you need to manage is your anxiety. And soon after that, I was on a bus in New York, and this man sat next to me, and he handed me two tickets. He said, I know you don't know me, but I would like you to go to Guru Mai's ashram in New York. And I went and I visited Guru Mai, and for some reason that I don't understand, without requesting it, I was given a private audience with her. And she gave me a mala, and she said to me, if you want more answers, Heather, she didn't give me much information. She said, go to India. That's what she said. So I came home and I said to my father, listen, I know that this is a strange request, but I need to go to India. And since you said I can study a semester abroad, that's where I want to go. And that's where I started yoga. And that's how it all began to unfold. So it was yoga and mindfulness practice from the Buddhist tradition. I worked with it in two ways. One was a beginning to understand that all mental phenomenon are processes. And that isn't easy. I mean, you have to sit in meditation for very long periods of time for that to be anything more than an intellectual concept. And being psychologically unwell, it was extremely difficult to sit in meditation because the critical thoughts and the self loathing thoughts would overcome me. But I was fortunate to have a very dedicated teacher. And in conjunction with that, practicing specifically asana at that time helped me to be with very clear sensations in my body. And when I took asanas that were for me personally challenging, and right, any but for me specifically, were challenging enough to direct my mind to the body, I would find that some of those intense thoughts about the past and the future would settle, and I would simply be experiencing the pulsing sensation of the here and now. And when I would stay present with that for a while, tension would release, and I would find that I would have more clarity then to sit down and do further meditation, again, seeing through the illusions of my thought processes, such as you're not lovable, you're not good enough, these things that happened to you in the past, you need to somehow magically fix the past, which one is not capable of doing, and control the future. And so it was through that dual approach that I was able to work with my depression. What did I glean from it? I gleaned the understanding that although we often perceive that external phenomenon are leading to the complications we have in the mind, and they may very well be the trigger, that it is actually our own process that is giving rise to these painful experiences. And that can be really difficult, right? It puts the onus of responsibility back on us. But it does mean as well that by cultivating the mind, it is possible to let go of that habit of negative thinking and supplant it with clear vision and seeing, and sometimes also positive thought. So I gleaned that, and also that I could help other people, which is probably the most important part of my journey. You know, I went to the depths of being unwell, and I worked really, really, really hard to become well. And so when somebody presents to me and says, "This is happening," often I know what it's like to be there. And the
Okay.
road.
How
I
long does it take?
Gosh, I mean, I think it's very person specific. I think that we also need to realize that if we have mental health issues, that we need to see yoga as hygiene and continue to do it for the rest of our lives, because we'll always have that propensity to go down the road of displeasure within the mind. But evidence suggests that 6 months of solid practice, like 5 days a week, a minimum of 30 minutes a day, does yield significant results. In fact, practicing for 6 months regularly seems to be more effective than if you were to practice once a week for a number of years. So I think that would be about the mark I would place. But there will, of course, be people whose mental health challenges are very extreme, and it will take them years. And one of the most important things that I learned on my journey is that I may always wear the scars of my past. You know, I didn't just have depression, you know, I had PTSD, and not to expect myself to be a perfect, always balanced human being, but rather to accept who I am with some levels of dysregulation and understand that that is the arising Heather Mason in this lifetime. And that is part of the healing as well.
And
So,
yoga.
okay, I was delivering an 8-week course for depression and anxiety with yoga therapy, right? Because I'm a yoga therapist and I run the Minded Institute, etc. And one of my students said to me, "There's a course in Boston on yoga for trauma. Nobody's done it in this country. Can you go do it?" And I went and I did it. And I just thought, okay, this is so important. Yoga has so much to offer to people with PTSD because it allows a gradual sensing into the body. And for a lot of people with PTSD, the body has been compromised in some way. And so attending to the body causes fear. It offers specifically the breath practices that allow for a regulation of the autonomic nervous system. And a key feature of PTSD and trauma is dysregulation there. It allows for, like you were saying, gentleness within the self, um, and the body to become a place of safety as opposed to a place of fear. And it's really a potent strategy. And when I did the training, I think it was in 2008 or 9, there were not that many movements for yoga and PTSD. And now I feel like it's really elevated and it's burgeoning. And the trauma community has a clear understanding that practices like yoga can really help their clients. I'm not exactly sure, but if you have more questions about yoga and PTSD, please ask me. You know, this is an area that I work in quite often. Well, preventive for sure. I mean, obviously, and unfortunately for people in the Ukraine, preventive is really not accessible to them. But for the world proper, you know, building the resilience of the nervous system is important. And I'm a huge proponent of breathing practices. I feel that the pranayama, the breathing practices offered by yoga, are, for me personally, the most potent aspect. And if you do things like elongate the exhalation, engage in ujjayi breath doing that, what you do is you increase the messaging to your heart through your vagus nerve, this nerve that starts at the brainstem and travels to many different places, including down to the heart. And every time you exhale, the vagus nerve releases acetylcholine to the heart, reducing the heart rate, which is further picked up as a message from the body to the brain, allowing for a stilling of the mind. So, simply practicing something as basic as that 10 minutes a day has the potential to calm the person down in the moment and cultivate resiliency. Another big thing that's being taught a lot to refugee populations is coherent breathing, which is inhaling and exhaling for a count of 6. So each breath cycle is 12, and that means 5 breaths per minute. That's been shown to have quite significant effects on cardiovascular measures of flexibility, psychological flexibility. So I think that the world over should be practicing pranayama. And I think that no matter what tradition somebody comes from, no matter how flexible they think they are or not, no matter what philosophical system they espouse, nobody should really have a problem with slightly altering their breathing. And if we did that, we could all enhance the capacity of the nervous system to become robust, protecting us against some of the tragedies that befall us. But of course, you know, for the people in the Ukraine, that is not a possibility. I do think that breath work should be part of the healing regime offered in all different kinds of therapy, and it can be done in large groups to support the social aspect as well, right? Because we do need social
Yeah.
bonds in order to support our well-being. Okay, so just to clarify, so the Minded Institute is a training organization for yoga therapists, and many of my graduates do enter the health system, but through their own efforts. I'm also the founding director of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, which created a protocol, Yoga for Health, and that's what works within the NHS proper. So
Okay.
the UK NHS has something called social prescribing. It's based on the understanding that social isolation is a major risk factor in a host of different diseases due to both poor self care and to the overall effect on systems of the body, like the cardiovascular and neurological systems, are actually impacted by isolation. Not to mention that high level cutting edge research also shows that there are different kinds of genetic expressions that lead to more
Mhm.
inflammation who are isolated. So, based upon this understanding, the UK innovated a scheme of social prescribing whereby individuals could be referred into activity groups that they were interested in. And yoga is one of the potential activities. The Yoga for Health program was commissioned by the West London Clinical Commissioning Group to be created and evaluated by the University of Westminster. We had stellar findings, and off the back of that, myself and Paul Fox, who's the CEO of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, have trained hundreds of yoga teachers in the UK and beyond, and they deliver that in their neck of the woods within the UK. And what I see happening is, as more and more little pockets of this occur, a lattice arising where maybe every different clinic or every different region of the UK, small regions, have this program available to people that have social isolation, and for the health populations that we built it for, which was early intervention of type 2 diabetes, mild depression, mild anxiety, and people at risk of a cardiovascular event in the next 10 years. And by addressing these groups in the early stages, we hope to save the NHS lots of money and also shift the health trajectories of a large corpus of people, because so many health conditions fall into social isolation, risk of cardiovascular event, mild mental health issues, and type 2 diabetes risk. No, I think that, the idea that yoga is perceived first and foremost as exercise is misconstrued, because actually, so the US has done the best surveys on this. The US does a complementary health survey every few years. The last one they did was on, I think, health data. I mean, it's a bit old now, from 2012, published in 2016. Now, about 1/3 of the US population uses complementary treatments. And since the US has about 330 million people, let's say that's like 100 million people. And as of 2012, 9.5% of those 100 million were using yoga specifically for health conditions. So if we fast forward another 10 years, it's probably now closer to 20%. And so I think there's a good proportion of people that understand the stress relieving effects of yoga. And I know that I spend a lot of time with the so-called converted people who are already convinced of the value of yoga. But when I speak to people, I don't usually hear, oh, I'm going to become a pretzel. I hear, oh, I heard that's really good for relieving stress. So I think that that's changing in the common mindset and will continue to do so. Well, I'm still waiting to find out. I sent a proposal to the Indian High Commission. Hi, Indian High Commission, with Amit, and we wanted to have Trafalgar Square and a big event there. But two other things will happen regardless. We will have a book launch on the 22nd, the day after International Yoga Day, at the Nehru Center. Myself and Paul Fox have actually authored a book called Yoga on Prescription, and we're launching it on the 22nd of June. It gets released for the public the day before, on the 21st of June. And on the 27th of June, there's this all-party parliamentary group on yoga and society. It's going to have a meeting in Parliament, and although that won't be specifically on International Yoga Day, it is still in celebration of it. And actually, I was going to send the invites out tomorrow, and I hope you will attend. We're not allowed to have anyone online, though, so that could be a bit tricky. But I hope at least a representative will come of your foundation will come physically.
Sure.
I don't know. I just needed to come up with a new name. I
Mm-hmm.
originally did yoga for the mind, but that was not descriptive enough. And I wanted it to be something more than just yoga in the name, because, I'm also teaching mindfulness. And I think literally I was sitting there one day and I just had this moment. It's just like I did my yoga therapy training and I didn't know what I would do with it. And I was driving back from a shop. It was the only day we were allowed to go to the shop, and the whole time we did that training, in a taxi back to the ashram. And all of a sudden, I had this epiphany that I would have to create programs for yoga for mental health. And as soon as I knew that, I just went forward with it. So I think sometimes things just arise for me. If you meditate a lot, knowing sometimes comes from the ether, and it's not even analytical.
Bye bye.
Thank you. It was lovely being here. Thank you. Thank you so much.